Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's My Games Recruitment Show, where we are talking about moving across to a retained-only model. And we have a great guest, Greg Elton, who's going to explain how even in this market, you can convert your practice to retained only. Now, Mike, before we get into that, do we want to discuss the brief snafu that happened today?
Well, apparently either StreamYard, a big American product, doesn't understand British summertime, or the person that set up the appointment. I don't. We should go any further than that. By the way, it wasn't me.
No, listen, there's three things I don't understand. One of them is time zones. One of them is British summertime. And one of them is how is the universe expanding? What's it expanding into? Anyway, it's my fault. I'm so sorry, guys. That's why we are starting at a slightly different time today. I very much apologize. It's my fault. But without further ado, Mike, let's get started. So why are we talking about this today? Why are we talking about retained models, and why have we got Greg on?
Well, retained has always been important. It had a bit of a kind of a boost to it after COVID. Everyone's going mad, good, better, and best, and a whole bunch of stuff, productization, which was great. It's slackened down a wee bit now, which is a bit of a drag. Just a cup of tea is right. Thanks. It's slacking down a little bit now. People are finding it hard, but if you assume that contingent placement ratio is 1 in 5 on average, that's what it is. So the further you go up the value chain, the better that becomes 1 in 3 and so on and so forth. But bottom end 1 in 5. So if you switch over to retained and you're pretty much 100%, I know it's not quite, but let's go with that. You're getting paid 5 times as much money for the same amount of effort and therefore the same amount of cost. So even if you took a little bit for expenses and commission and whatever, you're probably making a 400% leap in your profits. Let's say that again, Kirsty, 400% leap in your profits. So going to retained is still a really important focus point if you can. And I used to think, I'm going to say I was wrong here. I used to think it was really for the top end stuff, but as Greg's going to show us a little later on, our guest today, I think you'll find it's not. You can do it much lower down. Other benefits very quickly are it brings you closer to the client. You become the go-to girl or the go-to guy for that particular thing. You move in, the relationships are stronger. And also, I think you just have more control over it. It's an easier life in that respect. I know recruitment can hardly be called an easy life, but it is easier if you're not competing against everybody and his mother whacking CVs in left, right, and centre. So massive benefits. And I was looking for somebody who we could come on and talk about this, who wasn't an expert or a guru telling people what to do. I was looking for someone that had actually done it. And then I went to see a talk presented by Leisha Holmes. One of the speakers was Greg Elton, and he was that very person. He'd made the jump, very good at it, only did retainer. And I really liked what he said and how he said it. And he very gracefully agreed to come on the show. So we'll bring Greg in a minute. I'll just introduce him before he gets on so we can dispense with all of that, kind of coy embarrassment, as I say, how great he is. But he is the founder and CEO of Day 2, which is his sort of day job, recruitment. He's also the founder and chief coach, along with Lindsay Hartland, who was on last week's show, of the Recruitment Founders Club. And that's for people who are thinking of setting up as recruiters in their own business, or they've just done that and they're looking for help. So without further ado, let's bring Greg in.
Hi, Greg. How you doing?
Hi, everyone. How you doing?
Did I get that right? Was that about right?
Well, the bit about it was Kirsty's fault for the delayed meeting.
Yes.
Hey.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you for coming and joining us today, Greg. And I think we're just going to jump into it. So, Mike, do you want to ask Greg our first question?
Right. Okay. So really, I'm just interested how you made the jump to Lightspeed. So at some point, I'm sure that you were a contingent recruiter like everybody else with the odd exclusive deal here and there. And then here you are, 100% retained. Can you tell us, kind of share with us that journey and why you decided to do it as well?
Yeah, probably less, less deliberate than you would think. So I started in contingent recruitment at S3. That's where a lot of people, good, great, and somewhere in between, came from in the recruitment industry. So I started with S3, and then I got approached about a role with an exec search business, and I was working quite high salary levels for S3, relatively speaking, at that point. was working them on a contingent basis, sort of heard about this exec search, retained world, found it really quite intriguing, and I made the jump. And then that's been the last 15 years of my career. But what I would say, and what we will talk about today, is, yes, I made the jump into exec search as a world, but, for me, retained is a method of engagement. Search is a method of delivery, and they are very different. And, in a business that before I had day two, and I was MD of another business, we did scale that business to a degree, covering a lot of salary levels, but selling a retained model.
Okay, we'll drill down into that a little bit as we go through, because I think there's probably a lot of people watching the show today who are thinking, yeah, man, if I could go retained, that would be awesome. And obviously we're going to talk about how you do that and the detail of it all, but they're probably thinking, oh, well, I don't do search, I don't do big roles. It's probably not for me. Now, I know we're going to expand upon that later as well. So if you're thinking that, hold fire, because we've got something for you a little later. But first, what I wanted to dig into is something you just kind of hinted around there, I think. It'd be interesting when you made the switch from S3 to the search firm. If you do retained work, is it the same as doing contingent, except there's no competitors for that particular role? Or is it intrinsically different? The outreach and filter and presentation of CVs and all the rest of it. Is it different or the same? Or what should people think about if they're going to move up to retained?
Yeah, so I think this, back to that point I made around, retain's a method of engagement and search is a method of delivery. Right? A lot of people hear retained, but they think search. Actually, retained is the commercial model with which you're agreeing to work with someone. Search is a way of delivering. So search itself is, a little bit more time consuming. It's a little bit more thorough, and there is a bit more reporting to a client. But you can be retained and not be on the hook for a search service. So I think a lot of people, and that's what I want to try and demystify in this conversation. Retained is as I say, a method of being engaged commercially with your client. It doesn't mean for every retainer that you're working with, you've got to deliver them a full search headhunt process. They're not the same thing.
So let me guess if I've got this right, because that sounded really interesting. If I'm just a recruiter there doing regular searches, and I don't know, I'm doing 5, 6, 7, 8 grand fees, and I'm under contingent, yada, yada, yada. What you're saying is, if I get my head in the right place, if I approach it in a certain way, it's like, so I'm giving you the same service that I gave you before, except it's retained now, and I'm going to explain to you in a minute why that's a benefit to you, Mr. Client. Is that what we're talking about here? The actual thing I'm going to do is the same old.
Yeah, and I think a lot of recruiters and recruitment company owners, like, they hear retained and they just attach it to retained search. And I can't stress enough, retained is a commercial model. It's not the delivery model. And as soon as businesses get their head around that, I think it opens up so many different avenues to revenue, client development, and partnership that will enhance your relationship with your clients and ultimately your profitability per head and so on and so forth. As I said, I can talk, if we want to get into it, I can talk about search all day long because I've done it and I have done the big roles, big fees, yada, yada, yada. But I've also ran a business that's delivered a retained model in a scale phase where we weren't doing the big roles, and it wasn't search.
I think we may have you back on the show to talk about search in the future, but this I just love this concept, right? It's like no, you can do this for anything. Mm-hmm. I'm going to approach a client in a certain mindset, and I'm going to say, no, this is the way that we work, right? That's it, really. And there are reasons for this for us. There are also reasons for you, which we're going to talk about later in the way in which you pitch it. But what I mean, are there limits on terms of the size deal that you can approach with this? What kind of things have you done recently, say, or been involved with recently, which have been, I think you said on your speech at Lisha's thing, I think 40 grand salaries was above, you were okay with that, but have you done stuff less than that? Have you seen that happen?
Yeah, I think, so I won't name the individual because it'll embarrass her, but one of the sort of founders within Recruitment Founders Club rang me the other day, 3 roles with a client that they were going to give her exclusively, circa 30k salary level. But they're quite hard to fill roles. And so she was just talking to me about resource strategy and approach. And I said to her, well, why aren't you going retained for this? And the answer was, well, I just didn't think that would be feasible. I didn't think a third model would work. And I just sort of challenged her and I said, well, why has it got to be third? You know, and back to my earlier point, people attach retained with this draconian world of retained search and just think that that's the model. You know, ultimately, I sort of said, well, what if the retainer fee was a couple of grand as an engagement fee that's non-refundable? It's actually detached somewhat from your placement fees. Your placement fees are still based on percentage. You can even give them a sliding scale of economy based on the more they take from that talent pool. And, you know, she really bought into that. She pitched it and got it accepted within, I think, 2.5, 3 hours. So, you know, the retainer element, back to my point, and I will keep hammering it, it's a method of engagement. She got a retainer fee. So she's going to deliver in exactly the same way, you know, and the way that we'll go in, work with the client will still be attached to a percentage of salary for the placement fees. But there is an engagement fee in place that now gives her security that she knows she's got turnover coming. She's not just completely wasting her time. And the client's absolutely loving it because they know that they've paid a very sort of nominal fee, but to secure her dedicated talent and resource on their roles, you know. So I don't think there is a salary that cap, as it were, Mike.
Amazing. Okay, so Greg, I've got a question, and I think now is a really good time for me to bring this up rather than waiting for later. So this person's asked, how does the model change your terms of business? Do you use the same TOB and add a bit of verbiage in there? If so, what do you add? Words, yeah, the words. Well, if so, what do you add, or do you need an entirely different set of terms altogether?
Good question. So in our standard terms of business, it's, you know, we will have contingent terms, targeted introduction, and retained model. You know, it will be 3 sort of offerings. I don't really call it contingent. I call it, you know, I've got targeted introductions, I've got retained search, and then I do like campaign model as well, where we're charging an engagement fee with a sliding scale based on the scale of economy for same roles. I also don't offer a rebate. I do free replacement, but otherwise, you know, it doesn't greatly affect my terms of business.
So can I just drill down on this a little bit as well? Good question, Letha. Thank you. So you mentioned earlier a non-refundable payment up front, because I've seen exclusive, but a lot of exclusive terms, which are effectively saying, look, give us this gig for 4-6 weeks or whatever exclusively, and it's in the TOB, so it's not just some random loose promise. It's there, we're going to get this. Anything that comes in, we get it.
Yeah.
And you pay us a deposit, and if we don't deliver a credible shortlist, in other words, when we look at those people, they are suitable and serious based on what you've given us, then we'll pay the deposit back. And if they are, then we keep that deposit, and then we go ahead and place. And when we place, or if we place, we get the rest of it. Now, that's got pros and cons from that, but you're not talking about that, are you? You're actually saying, no. You pay us for this, and that's it. We keep the dough. That's what we're saying here, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's, for me, it's, I think one of the things the recruitment industry lacks a lot of the time is professional self-respect.
Yeah.
There's not another professional service sector out there that's saying they'll work 60 hours a week for you for bugger all. We're probably one of the only ones. And so, you know, I've had a few people that I know through the sector over the years say, can you come and speak to me or my team about moving to a retained model? Then they expect me to sort of open Mary Poppins handbag and I've got a box of tricks in there. The reality is it's a mentality for me. I value my time. I know I'm going to deliver for you. And I know I can tell your story in the market. Why wouldn't you pay for my time? Why wouldn't you respect that? Because I do.
I think there's a couple of things. This is leading us into the pitch in a second, actually, which is the next thing I want to talk about with you, how you pitch it. But first, on this point, I am adamant. I tell all my clients, you should think about yourself as a professional service provider.
Correct.
Mentality wise, get that into your head. Your time is valuable, your expertise is valuable, people want it. Because if you go into it cap in hand almost, and I know the market's bad, I know it's not great, I get it, but mentality wise, you can think however you want to think, really. And you are a professional service provider. I mean, how would it be if you went to, say, 3 lawyers and said, right, okay, you're all going to sell my house for me, but the one that does it first gets paid? Would you really be confident they'd done all the searches properly and looked at all the contracts properly? Because that might slow things down and someone else gets paid then, whether they've done a good job or a bad job. It's a nonsense. And I really think you have to change your mentality to begin to think of yourself as a professional service provider, because that's what you are, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the starting point for all of this and beyond. If you want to scale your business, that's the mentality you have to have. Okay, so let's just come in on this point of pitching, because it's a big deal. I mean, this is it, really. You can think how you like about yourself and you can have a lovely terms of business with it all set out. But if you don't pitch it properly, you ain't going to get that deal. What kind of tips have you got for us on how people should really approach these kinds of deals?
I mean, that's a really broad and nuanced subject, but trying to give a few bits of help. First things first, just get out of your head this whole third model, right? I think that is the typical thing that people think about with retainers. Now, that is the predominance of the way that I contract with my clients, because I do the senior roles. But when I've helped other businesses, or when I had a previous business and we were growing that, selling a retained service at a lower salary level, even a small engagement fee, that notional couple of grand, $3,000, whatever it is, it's a symbol of their respect for your time, and you're in partnership with that client, and you're dedicating that resource, you're dedicating that time, you're on the hook to deliver. And you mentioned a point earlier, Mike, about it being non-refundable and so on. You're on the hook for reputational damage. So it's one of those things. I've always been happy with that tension point, because if I don't deliver to the client, giving them money back, or them giving whatever, a bit of a refund is, that's the least of my concerns. I've lost the client, and then there is a little bit of piece around that should be noted. But I think, frankly, in terms of pitching it, it's largely a mentality thing. This is the way I work. This is why you're going to get the best out of us. This enables me to dedicate my time. I don't have to work 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vacancies, to achieve for my business what I need to achieve. I can just dedicate my time to delivering for you. I mean, that is ultimately no more complicated than that, if I'm honest.
I'll tell you something actually about this, which I've noticed, is that when we build business development engines for our clients, which is one of the components of a profit, lifestyle and wealth business, I often find that where it goes wrong with the pitch, and I'd be interested in your opinion on this, very interested actually, is that they're pitching for a role, not pitching for a relationship. So correct. They don't see the pitch as being a big deal. It's just, give us the vacancy, I'll do anything to get it. And if you go down this route, yeah, you've got to convey what the terms are and how it works, but they want the deal. Whereas we really do encourage people to say you're pitching for the relationship, and then the deals will come. And when we swapped over to that method, that's what the essence of strategic BD, that's what that is. When we swapped over from that method, I remember the numbers. We went from 0 to 5 million in 5 years. and from 5 million to 40 years in the 40 million pounds in the next 5 years. The graph went like that because we stopped pitching for vacancies and started pitching for relationships. We talked about not just get a job, I'm really good at it. That's my specialist niche area. Look at the deal I'm offering you. More to do with this is the big picture of our relationship. And by the way, yes, I can do this role. Let me explain how I'll tackle it, or whatever, however you pitch it. Do you find that with people when you're working in the Founders Club, that they're still pitching for vacancies?
Yeah, and as a sector, I think we are obsessed with quantity and not over quality. And actually, if you go and speak to all of your top billers, even in those quantity-driven organisations, I'll bet my bottom dollar the top billers are quality-driven. You know, and I have this joke with Lindsay, and we're going back, as I say, 15, 16 years. I was the top biller in S3. Linz was my manager, and I think I had 30 monthly KPIs I had to hit. And in the last month before I left, I achieved 3 of them. And I was way clear on billings than anybody else. Wow. And frankly, that was exclusive jobs pulled, interviews booked, and offers. None of the other crap mattered to me, right? Yeah.
Well, I just got to say that's Lindsay. Just wants you to know that he taught Greg everything he knew. Just on that, that's quite an interesting thing, because I think commitment to excellence is a crucial element of being successful in business, generally speaking. But in recruitment itself, the taking a vacancy, searching candidates, qualifying them and presenting them, that is actually what the client pays for, isn't it? If you think about it, they don't pay for your marketing or your sales or your annual, when you put it on the internet where people are taking the team off to the Caribbean or something. They don't pay for any of that. They pay for that little bit in the middle, and that's the bit that has to be excellent, and that's the bit that relates to those KPIs or diagnostic figures that you were talking about a second ago. How good are you in actually providing the service that the client wants? And I'll tell you one thing, the reason I bring that up now, you'd think it's got nothing to do with this, but it has, is if you're pitching for retained, and I know it's a commercial arrangement, as you said, that's a game changer for me, by the way. It's a commercial arrangement, but what you're selling them has got to be good if you're taking their money off them.
Absolutely. But it comes back down to your mentality, both as an individual or the culture of your business. Are you trying to provide a professional service, or are you just trying to be a sales machine? Yeah. You can't sell a retained model if you're trying to be a sales machine, right? No. And by the way, there's a lot of very successful businesses that only want to be a sales machine. That's fine, right? So I'm not discrediting that. But if you are wanting to provide a professional service and you pride yourself on that, well, why would you not want to take on less roles and increase your profitability for your seat or your business, whichever lens you're looking at it?
Mike, I can see you're about to say things, and I want to ask a question. Somebody's asked a really good question, and then we need to move on, I think. Somebody has asked, how would you calculate your upfront non-refundable fee, as this person has struggled with that a bit for fear of overcharging?
Okay. So there's two bits to that. I think the individual has talked about that fear of overcharging. Yeah, I think that goes much deeper. Back to that mentality piece. People are almost conditioned in our sector to be embarrassed to charge for their time, right? So I think that's the separate subject. But in terms of that upfront fee, I mean, as I said, I do charge third, there's 25, 25, 50, but also back to the member of the RFC community that I advised last week. You know, that was a notional couple of grand upfront fee. You know, that was it's a way of deepening that engagement mutually. So, and that was just a figure, frankly. I was stood in my garden on the phone and I plucked it out of the air. You know, there was no calculation to that. So demystifying it, it's what feels right. It's what felt equitable for those 3 roles and that circumstance. And the client went for it. So, you know, yeah.
Before you let that go, Kirsty, whatever, I don't know who you are because obviously it's come through LinkedIn as opposed to one of the other methods, or is it come through YouTube?
No, just their settings show it so we can't see who they are.
Whatever. Anyway, I'm telling you now, you're worth it. Charge for it. You're worth it. If you go into it with a different mentality, just kind of reinforcing what Greg just said, you go into it with that mentality, I wonder if I'm going to overcharge. You're not going to get it because you're basically saying we're going to get paid the whole fee anyway. So I'm just having a bit more upfront, that's all. Yeah. So it's about mentality again.
The clients have then got skin in the game, so they'll give you like better interview slots because they've already paid for it and elements to this engagement with that. But I think I was going to say, Martin said something here. So much of this aligns to the push in the industry to shake off the salesy image and move to being recognised as professional services, which I think is kind of what Greg and Mike have been saying repeatedly. Now, Mike, we do need to move on in a second, but is it around about the time for our message from our sponsor?
Oh, yeah, that's us again, isn't it? I do like it now with a sponsor. Yeah. Okay, put me on cursed. Okay, here we go. Right, so talked about this last time. I'm kind of easing you into this. We're launching, and this is free, just to be clear. We're not charging for this. A MARShow VIP content club. Okay, so we basically have got two levels of content at the moment: the stuff we give away and the stuff we sell. I want a new layer in the middle, which is better than the stuff we give away, not quite as good as the stuff we sell, and we want people to be part of that. So it's going to be launched in the next couple of weeks. It's at the beginning, it's going to be wrapped around a LinkedIn newsletter, but we are going to have a website with content on it. That's the plan. So to start with, we're going to start small. LinkedIn newsletter. You'll be invited to join if you've ever come to this show. You can choose to join or not join. It's going to be access and promotion of the show. So we'll give you each month the monthly newsletter. Each month we'll tell you the last two shows that we published with links if you want to go and watch them. And also the next two shows, so you can register for those if you're interested in the subject. We're also going to have some exclusive interviews, which will only be available through the VIP Content Club. So they will not be on YouTube and they will not be on LinkedIn. If you want them, and we've got some big names coming in, some really interesting stuff to talk about. Very excited about that, actually. Also, we do this for our breakthrough program, which is a paid thing that we sell, but we're going to have members only workshops, so they're going to be more detailed than the free stuff, perhaps not as good as some of the breakthrough stuff, but very detailed in the area. So what we do will be very good. They'll just be a bit narrower than you would get on breakthrough, and they'll be members only. So if you're not a member, you can't come. If you can, you can. And just to say, it's all free. So more on that next time when we come back. We'll have launched it, and you will be able to register from that point onwards.
What a great sponsor. What a great sponsor. Okay, right. So moving on, Mike. I now want to come to objections, because I imagine there's a lot of people watching this, Greg, who have either tried it before and maybe the clients have rebuffed them or pushed back, or they feel like they've got their fingers burned. So if somebody has tried it or someone's nervous about clients pushing back, do you have any advice on overcoming those client objections?
So, yeah, this is a difficult one for me, because I think everybody probably expects there to be a really brilliant answer, that they've not come across. The truth is, if you get in significant objections, you've not done the pitch right. That's the truth, right? And also, it's a really hard thing for a lot of recruiters to get their head around. But if you've got a client that's really against doing it, are they the right client for you? And in an industry that is bred to try and close every single deal that they come across, it's really hard. That is. But if I try and give you a couple of pithy bits that might work. So, clients will turn around and say, well, why would we give you money? Why would we do it? Because we've worked with you before and it's not changed. Well, I think in an economic climate where, there's prices getting pushed from every direction, business, life, etc., you as a company have got, the right to say our strategy is moving to a retained model, so that we are, able to dedicate resource, more focused to our clients, that increases our success and yours. So that's the model. That's the model shift for us. It's, we've got a lot of external pressures. Our prices have gone up to deliver our services, our staff, etc. We're not passing that on to you as a client, but what we are doing is we're changing our commercial model that just gives us a little bit more security. So that's one of the first things I've been advising people to pitch recently. That's working really well. And in terms of other client, what other objections might you get? Well, we've, other suppliers don't want that. Well, for me, we're not one of those suppliers. We want to be able to partner with you, represent you. It's taking exclusivity. Exclusivity just means you've left the vacancy only with me. It doesn't mean you're the only vacancy I'm working, right? Retaining me does, because I've got line of sight on the fee. You're going to get my dedicated time. You're going to get my team's time. So that's another subtle one. Exclusivity. Exclusivity of what? They're not buying your time exclusively. They're just agreeing only to give that vacancy to you. Whereas by flipping that from a retained perspective, you're able to say to them, you're getting my time. You are absolutely getting my dedicated time on this role. So maybe those couple of things help. But as I said, the biggest one is the one that I can help you the least with, which is the mentality. Clients know they don't retain me, they don't work with me.
I think there's a couple of things. I really like that, by the way, Greg. Both of those things that you've said, because certainly the mentality we've been pushing for ages. I just struggle to get it across. It's like, yeah, we are that, but then they act in a different way. No, you are a professional service provider. Think like that, act like that, and you're much more likely to convince the clients that you should be treated like that. I think that's the first thing. But interestingly, we did some work for a company. This is going back post-COVID, maybe 2-3 years. I've lost track of time, actually. To me, COVID was 2 years ago. Anyway, as you get older, time travels quicker. But the big thing with it is that they never bothered. And this is the first time I've come across this. I've come across it subsequent times. They'd never bothered to explain to the client what the benefits to them were. So everybody knows the benefit to the agency, of course, because you're going to get paid for your work and all the things that we just talked about. You're going to be in control of the process and it's going to be easier for you to really dig deep. But no one had explained to the client, this is a massive benefit to you, enormous benefit to you. And to summarize, I won't go into the depth, I'll be interested in your take on this, is that if it's contingent, you can only really target the 20% of people out there who are looking for a job. They're actively looking for the job. So they're on the job boards, they're on LinkedIn, they'll return email messages, they'll return WhatsApp messages, they'll return phone calls, right? So those are the people you've got to go for, because anybody else outside of that, when you're into the passive but open brigade, 40% of the population, you've really got to work hard to start a conversation with those guys because they're not looking for a job, right? But likelihood is you're going to find the great candidate in that group, and there's twice the size of the actively looking. But you can't afford to do all the outreaches and put the effort in, get to speak to them if you know you're not going to get paid, or you only get paid for 1 in 5. And I don't think that people realize that what you get is a lot wider search, a tremendous amount more effort, because you know you're going to get paid for it. I mean, there are other benefits as well, but I think this ability to convince the client it's in their interests, which, by the way, it is a really good mentality as well as part of this professional. I mean, have you come across that yourself, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is that that's straying into talking about search as a methodology a little bit.
There's a touch on search. There is a touch.
Being retained. And it, what I would like to stress for the audience is being retained by a client doesn't mean that you have to do a lot more or different work, So that's the first one. When you are delivering a search, yes, it's different. And I agree with everything you've just said there. You're able to target, that truly passive marketplace and lift up many stones and, check who's underneath sort of thing. But yeah, retained as a model doesn't necessarily, drive you to a load more work. It is, as I say, it's a method of engagement, and I really want to stress that.
Yeah, I really like that. That's going to come out again, isn't it? Okay.
We have had a really good question here from Ben, who said his business model is exactly in line with Greg, so he agrees with everything that Greg is saying. But just for clarification, is the small engagement fee you charge in addition to the overall fee or part of it?
Yeah, good question, Ben. So when I'm delivering a search, my first stage retainer is part of the fee. For the case study that I was referring to for one of our founders in RFC, that was a separate engagement fee that then covered 3 contingent roles that they were going to work. So it was a separate retainer fee and then a percentage of placement on each of the 3 roles that reduced, and any more than 4 and above was then at a fixed fee. So, I do sell a retainer for standalone roles, but I also, one of the things I think you can very easily sell retained model for is campaign-led recruitment or talent sort of mapping, where you've got multiple hires of a similar discipline, and that small engagement fee is related to that.
Okay, hopefully that has answered your question. Okay, Mike, we very, very briefly have time, if you want, to discuss the retained versus exclusive question before we start closing up.
I think we covered that off earlier when I asked Greg that question. I think he very eloquently kind of answered that. Again, coming back to retained, it's not a type of recruitment. It is just a business relationship is what it is, really. Whereas exclusive is a weaker version of that, probably only really usable if the client is very hesitant. If they've never used you before, perhaps you could use it then. But I agree with Greg's point earlier. If they're pushing back a lot on using retained or going down that route, potentially they're not the right client for you, and you should certainly think very hard about that if you have a choice.
Okay, all right. So then just this quick one. So David asked this question and you guys sort of started to answer it, but I just want to pull it out as clarification. So David asked, he gets it's all about mindset, and that's great, but can you just talk about how we convert existing clients that have used us on contingency to now saying, actually, the next brief we get from this has to be retained?
Yeah, I mean, I can try and help David there. I mean, ultimately, once again, I might lack inspiration here. Some clients are just going to flat know you, right? And you've got to take them on a journey, or maybe not even at all, right? But what I would say on that basis, I think there's a lot of change and transformation going on at a macro level in the economy and industry at the moment. So why can't your business model change? Yeah, why can't the way in which you engage your clients change? And why is it unreasonable for that to be the case? So as I sort of touched on earlier, no doubt, if you're a solopreneur or you're small business, big business, whatever bucket you fall into there, David, your costs will have gone up. And I also am fairly confident in saying your rates to your client haven't gone up. So therefore, what I would be saying is to those clients, look, my costs have gone up. I've not passed that on to you, but in order to continue at the rate we're at, I've got to change my model. And therefore, my model is changing to this, because that's a way of us being able to dedicate our time, knowing that there is a fee there. That gives us confidence that we're going to recover our cost. And that means that we don't have to pass on any of the business costs I'm swallowing onto you as the client. Have a go at that.
That's a really great position, Greg. I really like
David
that.
Yeah.
So. And so does David, doesn't it?
Yeah, so does David. So this is the final question before we kind of start rounding up. So Adrian has asked, have you won the retained business from clients who have existing agency relationships, or have you had to start off showing what you can deliver, I assume, contingently before the retained relationship began?
Sorry, what distracted me is me and Adrian know each other very well, actually. Long time ago, we went to school together. Hello, Adrian.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so have you won retained business from clients? Okay, really, really good question. So I'd be lying if there wasn't a bit of both in my career, but I would say for the last 7 or 8 years of my career, I just win, all my new BD is retained. I think there was a transition period whereby with some clients I'd sort of say, look, I'd do it on an exclusive basis, and then, I'd prove to you that I can deliver. To be honest, I haven't done that for a really, and I say 7 or 8 years, I'm just picking a figure out of the air there. It's possibly been longer than that. So I would say my model is my model. This is the way we work. As I say, my pitch is pretty sharp now in terms of what they're going to get from me. This is my track record, and we'll go and deliver. What I would say on that, for when you're pitching new business, the roles you've delivered in the past, how do clients know the terms of business under which you've delivered them, right? And why does it matter, right? Your track record's your track record. So by telling a client, look, we've delivered in this way, this is the way we work, I think you can transition to that pretty quickly.
Amazing. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we've kind of come to about the end of the show. So in a second, we're going to come to Greg, and he's going to give the top tips. So we're talking about retained, and you want to move forward. What's the thing that you need to do first to be successful at it? But before then, Mike, can we talk about our next show? Because I am interviewing a very important guest. You.
Oh, no, it's me. He couldn't make it, so it's me, actually. We're going to do this alternative candidate sourcing methods, right? So when I started history lesson, there was no internet, there was no LinkedIn, there were no job boards, there was no email, there was no mobile phones, there was no laptops, none of that stuff. But we still placed lots and lots and lots of people. We still found people and placed them. And in this age now where LinkedIn is becoming ever more powerful, and intransigent when it comes to negotiation, the job boards keep putting their prices up. How about if we could link all this new technology that we have now, including AI, with some of the older methods that worked really well back in the day, and create something which means that you don't always have to use the job boards in order to make your placement. Sometimes you can do it in a different way. So it's really going to be exciting conversation. I'm not going to get down memory lane and get all nostalgic on your asses. That's not what we're going to do. But we are honestly going to drill down on this because I think it's really important.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so Greg, we discussed this. The way that we run the show is at the end, we want somebody to go away and have something that they need to do in order to get good at retained. So your top tip is this. Retained is a method of engagement, not just delivering. You've mentioned that a couple of times today, but do you just want to reinforce it?
Yeah, I mean, I just, as I say, I think a lot of people hear retained, they think search, and actually one's a commercial engagement and relationship with your client. The other is one of many recruitment methods of delivery. They're not always entwined, right? So for me, I think that's the big takeaway that I'd like listeners to absorb, is that you can actually move to a retained model by doing that. And secondly, how that works commercially, there is no set formula. And as I said, you can go for a notional fee if you're recruiting for multiple of the same roles. You can go for a 25% or a third of your fee up front if it's a very niche, confidential, or a senior role. There's many different ways in between. For me, it's just a method of taking the commercial engagement and commercial relationship with your client to another level.
Well said.
I love it. Okay, Mike, it is about that time of the show where we say goodbye. So first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who's watched. You guys have asked some excellent questions. You've really been engaged, and thank you so much for that. I, of course, want to say a huge thank you to Greg for just coming here, being really open, sharing some, I think, really helpful things to consider when you're moving to. I love that top tip. I love it. So
but none of us believe that Lindsay Hartland. None of us believe that he's taught you everything that you know. None of us.
We think it's the other way around. Right? We think.
Yeah. I'm not getting dragged into that one, Mike. I'm not leaving you with a little clip on that. Don't you think you're going to get me into that?
Okay. Go ahead. Greg, obviously you dropped a lot of knowledge with us today, but if anybody else has any further questions, or if they want to know more about the Founders Club, is the best thing for them to do just to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm happy to help.
Perfect. Okay, amazing. And of course, I should say thank you to you, Mike, for just being magnificent, really.
Well, I don't see why you have to, but since you have, I'll take it. Thank you. And thank you, Greg, as well. I knew this would be fun, and it absolutely was. It was great having you on. Thank you.
Thanks, Bo. Thanks for the invite.
Okay, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.